Well, Sean O'Neill is a senior writer at The Times and joins me now. He's won a press award this week for the Campaign of the Year. The reason he's won the award is his brilliant journalism, but what has inspired that is very sadly, in this instance anyway, the death of his daughter who had ME, a much misunderstood condition. I want to understand it a bit better now, and I want to understand how we deal with people who have ME in this country, because if you look at what the coroner was told at Maeve Boothby O'Neill, his daughter, Maeve's inquest in October last year, the coroner said there was no current available funding for research into and treatment for the chronic fatigue syndrome, and said there was extremely limited training for doctors treating patients. The coroner heard there was not a single NHS or private bed in England set aside specifically for the treatment of a patient with severe ME. That's disgraceful. Sean joins me now. Sean, good morning and congratulations on your award.
Morning, Peter. Thank you.
Tell me what inspired your writing. Tell me about the journey that Maeve went through, because this is something that she lived with for more than half her life.
Yeah. Maeve developed a viral infection when she was about 12 or 13. Hard to sort of remember exactly when it was, but she had complications ever since. Initially, it was mostly fatigue and dizziness and things like that. And I distinctly remember one day picking her up from school. She'd been fainted while out cross-country running, and that was the first kind of alarm bell for her family that something wasn't quite right. And we were told at the time by doctors that, oh, young girls get this kind of blood pressure, low blood pressure, fainting, etc., etc. With Maeve, it never really recovered. She battled on until she passed through. She got her A-levels. She did really well in her A-levels, but she didn't feel well enough to go to university. And really, she was at home, and her health was declining since then. And the last couple of years of her life, last 2 or 3 years, she was completely housebound, then bedbound. She lived with her mum down in Devon. I lived in London. It became difficult to even see her because seeing people was exhausting. She became more and more isolated. But she had spirit, you know. She would write funny emails and funny texts, and she had her life force still. I think her mind never declined. She was really sharp. She was really knowledgeable about her condition, and she fought it as best she could until the last 6 or 7 months of her life. She just became horribly, horribly ill, was in and out of hospital 3 times. The hospital basically admitted they couldn't do anything for her. They didn't have any training, they didn't have any expertise, they didn't have any treatments, which when you think of ME as a disease or a post-viral condition that affects hundreds of thousands of people in this country, and there is nothing, no specialist services across the country for them, and as far as I can see, there won't be any. So
why not, Sean? Why are there not? Why do they not exist, and why won't there be? This is clearly a huge problem, and surely the health service should do something about it.
That seems the obvious thing, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that it's hard to get to the bottom of this. There is a deep cultural resistance in the medical profession to believing that ME is a physical illness. There's increasing small but quite significant research pointing towards proving the belief that most patients have that this is post-viral. You know, that something happens. More and more doctors do accept that something happens in the body of ME sufferers, something happens in the wake of a viral illness, such as COVID, for example, or flu, or Epstein-Barr, or, you know, there are many viruses, that the body changes somehow. The body doesn't recover in the way that most of us recover. And people have these prolonged spells of fatigue. For some people, it can be a fluctuating illness, for some not. But there's a deep-rooted body of opinion within the medical profession, especially in psychiatry, that this is a mental illness. Mm-hmm. That somehow it's all in the mind, that these patients are, what they need to do is pull their socks up, do exercise programs, and they'll get better. They'll shake it off, you know, a bit of CBT and a bit of exercise therapy, and you'll get better. That belief persists. It's really deep. I mean, one of the doctors, a couple of doctors who treated Maeve in hospital were in my opinion, were of that view, but
Right.
daren't say it. They said that
Yes.
they didn't know. And we had other doctors. I mean, there was one guy who admitted her and sent her home the same day, even though he said she's really weak and really ill. He sent her home because he had absolutely no training in a condition that he admitted in the inquest was quite common. He saw quite a lot of. And it's almost staggering that there's no.
It is staggering.
And you know, there's an online training program, a sort of module you can take. That's it. It's not good enough.
Yeah. So what have you been campaigning for? Tell us about your campaign. Tell us about what you've been writing about and telling people through the Times.
I think, to be honest, Peter, I didn't see this as a campaign at first. I saw it as, especially, so Maeve died, it's almost 4 years ago. It'll be 4 years in October. But she died in October 2021. And we had a 3-year wait for an inquest, and the inquest process was supposed to be, I thought, where we'll get some answers and some explanations. I'm not sure we ever got any answers, but it almost felt that the only way I could get through this process, because you wait 3 years, you're grieving, the grieving process is kind of halted, frozen, and then you have to relive that death again, dissected by lawyers. 6,600 pages of documents to wade through, no legal support for us as a family, but the hospital, the GP surgery, the local social services all had lawyers paid for out of the public purse. I mean, that's another scandal in itself. But I felt the only way I could do this as a journalist was to make it a public issue. I didn't really want to make Maeve a public figure, but I felt that there was something to be said and done, that the court of public opinion around how we deal with people with ME, how we treat people with ME, that court was more important than the coroner's court.
Yeah.
So I'd set out to raise awareness rather than to campaign, I think.
And Sean, you yourself, of course, were dealing with some of the biggest stories in the UK around the time that Maeve was suffering through these many years. You're a very, very senior, decorated reporter doing so many different big stories. What was it like for you to deal with sometimes the emotional toil of those stories, whilst at the same time thinking about your daughter going through this illness that so few medical professionals understood or treated properly?
Like anything, you know yourself, Peter, you have to kind of compartmentalize things, and that's, you know, there were times when Maeve wanted to talk about this publicly, and there were times when she didn't, and I had to respect her wishes with it. And you know, stories, I have that sort of mental ability to put them in a box and deal with them and try and complete them and finish them. This, on the other hand, was completely different. This was dragging myself into the middle of a story and a publicity issue, and it was incredibly difficult. And I think, you know, to win the award for Campaign of the Year at the Press Awards was, I think, recognition not just of people with ME, but I think of the Times as a newspaper. I mean, the support that the editor and my colleagues gave me was exceptional. And the weight of the Times as a brand, as a newspaper reporting on this was incredibly important in influencing what government and what the coroner said, and eliciting promises from ministers, promises which have yet to be acted on, I might add. But it was, like I said, it was a way of me dealing with it. But at the end of it, I mean, it's almost now, I'll be dead honest with you, talking to you now about it, it's a bit like putting my hand back in the fire again. I think on a personal level, unlike any other story, I need to draw a line and stop, you know. And I had very much in my mind my colleague and friend, Andrew Norfolk, who died recently, and what the emotional toll stories can take on him. Andrew got highly personally involved in stories, and
He exposed grooming gangs and did incredible work on that. He died recently.
Yeah, but it took a big emotional toll on him, I know personally.
Yeah. What do you want to happen now? You talked about some of those promises that have been made to you and haven't been acted on so far. What should happen? What are the first steps in getting some sort of change?
I think government has been promising a delivery plan on ME for 3 or 4 years now. That plan is due to be, it's been delayed again, it's due to be published by the end of June. I would like to actually see some concrete steps in that. What I would love, I think, would be a specialist unit somewhere in the NHS that people with severe ME like Maeve had could be treated compassionately and with their special needs addressed, because hospitals are like factories. They're noisy, busy places, and it's very, very difficult for somebody who's as ill as Maeve to even be in a hospital, frankly. But I think compassion, specialist care, above all, money for research. There's an illness here that I was at an event recently where scientists were talking about, we think we're at a tipping point. We're coming to understand more what it is, but we need more investment in research. And it's not a huge amount that's needed, with our AI technologies, with DNA information. A lot can be achieved for a little money, I think, in this field. But I know that at the moment there is no commitment from anyone in government to put any additional money into cracking ME.
We've talked a lot about Maeve, her suffering, and very sadly her death. How will you remember her? The illness, of course, a big part of her life, but there's so much more. And I wonder if you could just tell us a little about her as a person.
She was, God, I have to turn to the years before she was really ill, but she was sparky, she was feisty, she was an incredible devourer of books, and she was, a funny, really funny, bright girl. And I suppose I try and remember things like taking her swimming and her drama shows and her bike riding and little simple childhood things that I think with time passes, grief turns to you try and remember the happy things as best you can. And that's what I try and do now. I try to separate the ME stuff and whatever campaigning I do on that from the person that I have to remember, and I have to remember as fondly as possible, try not to dwell on her last months and days.
Sean, thank you for speaking to me today. I really appreciate it, and you're a great human being as well as a brilliant reporter and campaigner, so thank you for speaking to me today. Sean O'Neill, senior writer at The Times there and winner of the Press Award for Campaign of the Year, and rightly so, remembering his daughter Maeve Boothby O'Neill.